Hare Krishna. Welcome back to the Isopanisad course. Now we come to the last section of the Isopanisad, wherein there are prayers. Till now it has been more of a description based on a mystical vision or a deep insight. Now that the description is reaching its conclusion, now there is a appeal to the supreme reality. Towards him the whole discussion was pushing, that please help me. So let's look at the overview of the Isopanisad to understand how this section comes up. So first was section invocation, the 3 is live in harmony with Ishvara. Then if you want to live in harmony with Ishvara, we have to know the Ishvara. So for that we have to acquire spiritual vision. That was the next section. And how do we acquire spiritual vision? By right vidya and right upasana. So what is the right vidya? The balance between vidya and avidya, the balance between worship of Sambhuti and living through the Vinasham, the temporary. That was discussed in section 9 to 11 and 12 to 14. Now, after one has got knowledge, after one has done worship, still after that also there is another factor, that is mercy. So, knowledge, when we want to make spiritual advancement, at that time we need knowledge. I am not the body, I am the soul, that is supreme being. And then we have to offer our heart to God. So we have to intellectually understand God, then we have to offer our heart to God. And then after that, God has to bestow His mercy on us. And then we make spiritual advancement, we ultimately return back to God. So in Damodar Leela, there were 2 fingers that were shot. One, it is said, is Yashodamai's endeavor, the second is Krishna's mercy. So the endeavor involves cultivating knowledge as well as doing worship. Now cultivating knowledge is not necessarily Jnana Marga, it is also a part of bhakti and doing worship. So chanting Hare Krishna and trying to be attentive while chant is a part of our endeavor. And seeking Krishna's mercy and gaining Krishna's mercy, the descent of Krishna's mercy is his part. So now the Isopanisad is moving forward to focusing on beseeching the mercy of the Absolute Truth. So this is the last section, prayers to Ishvara to reveal himself. You want to live in harmony with him. That is not just based on fear that I will be punished. It is based on attraction to the Ishvara. So for that, let the Ishvara reveal himself. And herein we see the last section's brief summary, overview. So there are 4 verse mantras in it. So 15, 16 are basically talking about take me beyond the white light to the Supreme Brahman. So this is a request, this is a appeal to take beyond Brahman to Bhagavan. And then 17, 18 is an even more personal prayer. Now that we've perceived the Supreme Person, we know that the Supreme Person is supremely merciful and we need the mercy. So I have facing so many obstacles because of my own past conditionings, because of the way my mind and senses are dragging me here and there, and I need help. So take me through all the obstacles of conditioned life to you. That is the last section. So actually the last 2 mantras and their purports are intensely devotional. And Srila Prabhupada's analysis is very hope-giving as far as helping sadhakas to face the battles that they have and overcome the conditionings that are there inevitably for all of us. So let us start with the 15th mantra. Basically this is a prayer beseeching the Lord's grace so that we can behold His beautiful form. This is an oft quoted verse mantra by our acharyas. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tattvam bhushan pavrunu satyadharmaya drishtaye. So Hiranmayena patrena. Hiranmaya is golden effulgence. Patra is a covering. Satyasya apihitam mukham. Of that absolute truth, apihitam is covered. Mukha is the face. So the face of that absolute truth is covered by a dazzling effulgence. Tattvam pushan apavrunu. Pushan means you are the maintainer, O Lord. One who does poshana. One who does maintenance is pushan. Apavrunu. Apavrunu means please remove, please reveal. And Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye, by which your Satya Dharma, dharma is like nature. The dharma of sugar, sweetness, the dharma of living in it to serve the Lord. That is a very essential nature. So unto the devotee, so the one who is living according to dharma, our dharma is to love and serve, which the Prabhupada translates it that. Unto the devotee, Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye, for revealing, for exhibiting. So one who lives according to dharma is referred to here as Dharmaya. Now, what is the translation as Srila Prabhupada gives us? O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, this is Pushan, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham. It's covered. So kindly remove that covering. Tattvam Pushan apavrunu, and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye. So this is one of the most important verses in the Isopanisad for talking about the personal aspect of the absolute truth being a higher reality than the impersonal. So there is a dazzling effulgence, there's no doubt about it, and that is acknowledged even by the Vaishnavacharyas. But the Vaishnavacharyas say that the dazzling effulgence, which is all pervading, is not the ultimate reality. There is a reality beyond that, and that reality is the reality of the Supreme Person, who has a mukham, who has a face. It is that face that is to be long to be seen, and he desires to see it over here. So let us look at the purport that Srila Prabhupada has given us and see the overview of that purport. So Srila Prabhupada's purport is remarkably insightful. And first point is Pushan. Normally we would consider the word Pushan, one who does maintenance, to refer to the Lord who provides heat, light, air, water. And that is correct. But Srila Prabhupada takes the discussion much deeper, and he says that Krishna is the basis of Brahman and Paramatma. Krishna is as Bhagavan. And then Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye, that how Krishna reveals himself beyond the Brahman. So the idea of the verse is that there is a reality beyond Brahman. Beyond the light there is a higher reality which needs to be seen, and that reality is Krishna himself. Krishna reveals himself beyond the Brahman. And then the paragraphs 6 to 10 are essentially talking about how the ultimate revelation of Bhagavan comes only by bhakti. So although there are many aspects of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, but if you want, and they can be accessed by various yogic methods, if one wants to access Bhagavan aspect, then one has to apply the process of bhakti. Let us look at all these points one by one now. So, Srila Prabhupada gives a very profound analysis in this purport. And what he essentially describes is how Bhagavan is the ultimate revelation of everything. The ultimate revelation means that Bhagavan contains whatever is there in other aspects of the absolute truth, but there is something higher that is also there in Bhagavan. So let us look at this. Now, how Bhagavan is the ultimate revelation? In Sankhya, there are various processes: Sankhya, Jnana, Yoga and Bhakti. Now Sankhya and Jnana can be slightly related, but there is some difference. What is Sankhya? Sankhya comes from the word Sankhya. Sankhya means to count. So on one side of the table we see the process, and on the other side we see the level of God realization that can be achieved through that process if that process is followed alone without integrating it into bhakti. So Sankhya in Sanskrit refers to counting. That's what it is in Hindi and several other vernacular languages also. So in Sankhya, basically the spiritual seeker starts analyzing the material world around and start thinking, what is this material world ultimately made of? Is there any reality? I see beautiful forms, I see beautiful tastes, beautiful fragrance, delicious tastes, captivating fragrances. So, what is the reality beyond all this? Is there some unifying reality? Now, at this stage, the seeker is not necessarily looking for a spiritual reality. He's just looking for a reality beyond the appearances. So, in this case, the seeker moves towards the fundamental elements. So, for example, when we see a very attractive looking puri, just feel that I can eat it now. It's so delicious. It's nicely puffed up and it's round in shape and it just looks eager to eat. Now, if we look backwards, what would happen is that puri is made of some atta and it is made of some oil. Now, if somebody put that atta in front of us, our mouth will not water. Somebody put that oil in front of us, our mouth will not water. But if that atta, if that flour and that oil is blended together, is cooked together nicely, and is made into puri or a pakoda. Pakoda involves some other things, sabjis and other things. But whatever, when a combination is made, it becomes so attractive. But whereas if you go to the original elements, the attraction is not so much there. Now, whatever is looking attractive is made of certain elements. A gulab jamun will be yummy, it will be mouth-watering. But if you go back to its ingredients, they themselves may not attract us so much. So, even at a material level, we can look for an underlying reality beyond the appearances. So, in Sankhya, rather than getting caught up with the forms and the tastes and the fragrances of the world, the seeker tries to look beyond. Says, okay, what is this ultimately made of? What is this ultimately made of? So then, fine, okay, everything that is there is made of earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then there is, of course, mind, intelligence, ego, and then there are the five sense objects. And there is a variety of elements like that. And once one starts thinking about it, in an attractive form, if I think it is just made of earth, water, fire, air, ether, now none of those individually will very attract me, to anyone. It's not that people are, if they see earth, water, fire, air, nobody is going to sing love songs for any of these elements. So, by going towards the deeper aspects of even material nature, one can become detached from the good-looking and seducing appearances. And that is the pursuit of Sankhya. Now, Sankhya, there can be atheistic Sankhya and theistic Sankhya. So, our Acharyas explained that atheistic Sankhya is unbona fide. That is not actually the Vedic teaching, it is a deviant teaching which has come from an unauthorized Kapila. The authorized Kapila is Lord Kapila from the third canto, who gives theistic Sankhya. So normally, when in Sankhya, the analysis goes backward, and one thinks that, okay, what is the ultimate reality? Beyond all these appearances, the fundamental elements of the material world, they are the ultimate reality. And that's how a person goes forward. So Srila Prabhupada is quoting here based on Jiva Goswami Sandarbha analysis, and he explains that actually in Sankhya, by analysis to this essence of material things, one can arrive at the conclusion the absolute truth is as matter, that is the elements of the material world. When Sankhya rises further, one's vision goes to seeking the spiritual beyond the material. And then at that one level, one starts doing the process of jnana. Jnana and Sankhya are in a continuum. In this particular analysis, they are separated by whether one is perceiving spiritual reality or only material reality. So when, by the process of intellection means intellectual analysis and contemplation, when one comes to the conclusion of matter as the ultimate reality, then that is Sankhya. So many of the scientists and researchers today will be in some way Sankhyites. Now Jnana means one goes beyond matter to consciousness, to spirit. At that point, one realizes matter is changing, but underlying that, there is a spirit that is unchanging. So at that time one realizes the absolute truth to be spirit, to be eternal spirit. So at that time one has realized in the Sat, Chit, Ananda features of the absolute truth, one has realized the Sat aspect. Sat is eternity aspect. So this eternal aspect is actually the realization of Brahman. So now the absolute truth is one, like we discussed right in the beginning of the course, in the invocation, that Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan are the same absolute truth. They are all Advaya Tattva. They are all non-dual, non-different from each other. Although they are non-different from each other, although they are Advaya Tattva, still they are referred to by these specific names because they also correspond with specific levels of realization. So when a seeker has realized the Sat aspect alone, then the conception of the absolute truth is the Brahman conception, or the all-pervading eternal light. When the absolute truth has been perceived as Sat and Chit, as all-pervading and as conscious being who is perceiving things, then at that time it is a Paramatma aspect. And then when Sat, Chit and Ananda, one who just not perceives but relishes, one who reciprocates pastime, love and performs pastimes, then one is perceived the Bhagavan aspect. So remember we discussed, say, the example of a gulab jamun. So when I get the fragrance, then that is one level perception. Second is the sight, that is second level perception. And third is the taste. So now when I get the fragrance, it is the same gulab jamun that is being perceived, but only one part. Oh, there is some delicious item there. When there is the fragrance and the taste and the sight, then there is one more level of perception. That is like the Brahman aspect perception is like just the perception of the fragrance of the gulab jamun. The perception of the Brahman and the of the fragrance as well as the sight. That is the Brahman. From the Brahman one moves to Paramatma, when one perceives Sat and Chit, and one is fragrance, sight and taste. Then there is the perception of Sat, Chit, Anand, that is the Bhagavan aspect. So now here we have discussed this. Here Srila Prabhupada is taking that process deeper and talking about the various processes that give that realization and how much is the realization of the absolute truth, complete or incomplete, not on the point of Satchidananda, but from the point of view of potencies. The absolute truth is Shaktiman and the absolute truth is Shaktis. Parasya Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate. The Upanishads say this. The Shrutis say this. Parasya Shaktir. That is absolute truth is Shakti. Vividhaiva, many of them. And Swabhavaki Jnana Balakriya cha. They act naturally. Swabhavaki. What is the Jnana is there, Bala is there, and Kriya is there. So there is knowledge acquisition, there is strength of execution, and then there is the actual activity of execution. So all these are the potencies of, this is one way of looking at the potency of the absolute truth. So in the Jnana aspect, one perceives the absolute truth without potencies. That means the absolute truth is just pure consciousness. There is, now when we use the word pure consciousness, that is used, we often use it in a different sense from which the impersonalists use it. When we use the word pure consciousness, we mean to say that the consciousness is not contaminated by lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, illusion, no selfishness. Pure consciousness. That means there is simply the desire to serve, the desire to love Krishna. That is pure consciousness. But whereas when the impersonalists use the word pure consciousness, they use it in the sense that there is nothing except consciousness. So we discussed this earlier. Say if right now I am looking at you. So I am the conscious observer, you are the observed, and there is the act of observation. So there is a subjective consciousness, that means the person who is perceiving. There is consciousness as a stream of awareness flowing, and there is the object of consciousness. There is subject, there is stream, and there is object. These three are involved in the act of conscious perception. When you are seeing, you are the subject of consciousness, your consciousness flowing towards me, that is the stream of consciousness, and then I am the object of consciousness for you. So when the impersonalists consider, at the Gyan level of realization, when they consider pure consciousness, they have the idea that there is no subject and there is no object. There is only consciousness. That is all that exists, nothing else. So nothing else means, so their idea of pure consciousness is there is neither subject nor object. That's what they call as pure consciousness. But the problem with this idea is that consciousness alone, how from that consciousness any subject or object, the illusion will ever come? If that is all that Brahman is, where does Maya come, where does illusion come from, and how does illusion overcome that consciousness? So, but anyway, the idea here is this consciousness simply exists. This consciousness actually is not even in a sense conscious, because there is nothing to be conscious of and there is no one to be conscious. Nothing to be conscious means there is no object of consciousness, and no one to be conscious means there is no subject of consciousness. So actually the whole idea of just consciousness without any subject, without any object, is just an abstract intellectual conceptualization. So such a consciousness has no potencies. Now, there is no, so for example, if I see a room on fire, when I am sitting here, so then I see that there was a room over there and it has caught fire. So there is the object of consciousness, there is fire over there. And the subject of consciousness, oh, it's got fire. I immediately look for a fire extinguisher, I call out to people, I look for water, and I try to do something. So when there is the object of consciousness and the subject, then there is a release of energy and there is action happening. But when there is no subject, there is no object, there is no action. So there is practically no potency. Potency is experience through action. When you say this person is very strong, how do we know that person is very strong? The person does something which is exhibiting a lot of strength. So here, at the Brahman level, one perceives the absolute truth without any potencies. And that perception is achieved through the process of jnana. So the analysis which Srila Prabhupada is drawing over here is that we gradually move from Brahman to Paramatma towards Bhagavan, and how Bhagavan is the highest realization. Now we all know the preliminary example of the sun, the sun god, the sun planet, and then the sun rays. The sun rays are the Brahman, the sun planet, sun disk, or the sun planet is the Paramatma, and the sun god, the predominating deity over there, is Bhagavan. So that is one way of analyzing the hierarchy of Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Here Srila Prabhupada is giving us a much deeper way of analyzing, and we are trying to understand this. And both ways the conclusion is that Bhagavan is the highest reality. Now beyond that, then there is through the path of yoga. So through the path of jnana, one comes to Brahman realization. Through the path of yoga, one can come to the Paramatma realization. So what is the Paramatma realization? There is Sat aspect and Chit aspect. That means the absolute truth is Sachidananda. But at the yogic, through the yogic path, at the Paramatma level of realization, one has not pursued Anand aspect, one has pursued only Sat and Chit. The gulab jamun has fragrance, shape and taste. But right now one has smelled the fragrance and seen the shape, but one has not yet relished the taste. That is Paramatma realization. There is Sat and there is Chit. Now, interestingly, Jiva Goswami, and based on him, Srila Prabhupada says that this refers to the absolute truth with only material potencies. Now, why would we consider the Paramatma as the absolute truth with material potencies? Because the Paramatma is supervising the material world. And to supervise the material world requires potencies. It requires, in fact, phenomenal potencies. If we came to know that there is a factory which has 10,000 employees, and there is a person who is the supervisor of that, we would understand, oh, this person must be very powerful. To be able to supervise 1,000 people, 10,000 people, a large number of people like that, requires power. So, the Paramatma is envisioned as the governing being of the whole of material existence. Upatrishta Anumanta cha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara Paramatmeti Chapyukto Tehesmin Purusha Para. So in 13.23 in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes Upadrishta Anumantacha. Upadrishta is the overseer. Anumantacha is a permitter. Bharta, Bhokta, Maheshwara. Bharta is the maintainer. Bhokta is the enjoyer. Maheshwara is the supreme Ishvara. And who is this? Paramatmeti cha pyukto. This is Parama. This absolute truth is known as Paramatma. And what is the nature of that absolute truth? Where is it situated? Dehesmin Purusha Para. This is the transcendental person situated in the body. So prior to this verse, Krishna has said about how there is an Purusha who is caught up in the body. At 13.22, Purusha Prakritisto hi bhumte prakritijan gunan karanam guna sangosya sadasad yoni janmasu. So Krishna says the Purusha is Prakritisto hi. This Purusha is not Prakriti. He has been Purusha Para. He is not transcendental. He is caught up in Prakriti right now. And because of that, there is Asad Yoni Janmasu. There is the entanglement with good and evil in this world, in various species. So our point here is that for the super soul to be able to function as the supervisor of the material world requires enormous potencies. Imagine if the rains were falling and at that time suddenly we decided we don't want rains here because there is already enough water over here, but 50 kilometers away there is a village where there are droughts. And suppose we could have some technology by which suddenly we could get heavy winds to blow, and all the clouds along with the rains just as they're pouring, they're moved aside, and the rain falls in the drought affected area. It would require tremendous power, isn't it, to be able to do that. So that is actually the power of Indra, Vayu and other Devatas, but all their power is insignificant as compared to the power of the Paramatma. And Lord Vishnu, he is the god of all the gods. So he has phenomenal material potencies. Now why material potencies alone? Because all the potencies are used to control the material world. They are not used to control the spiritual world. Right now, the whole conception of spiritual reality is not there at all. Right now the conception is there is the material world and there is a conscious being in charge of the material world. So this is higher because it's higher than the Brahman realization, because in the Brahman realization the idea was that there is just pure consciousness. But now the understanding is that there is not just there is not just consciousness in terms of our consciousness is impure, because according to the impersonalist idea that to think of duality is impure. To think that I and you are different, that is impure, because the pure idea is that you and I are one. We are both one. That is the idea. And so they said to see duality is impure. But here the understanding is there that apart from our contaminated consciousness, there is a transcendental consciousness. There is a consciousness of the Supreme Being who perceives all the material world and oversees it. So this is a higher perception because one has recognized a reality beyond the reality of one's own consciousness. That the reality of the Supreme Consciousness. And so that's why it's Sat and Chit. So Chit means there is an object of consciousness, that is the material world. There is the subjective consciousness, the Supreme Being. And then there is a stream of consciousness. That Chakshuryasya Narishyati, the same Manu who is in a mystical vision revealing the Isopanisad to us, is also the speaker of the prayers in the 8th canto, 1st chapter. And there also, where the prayer starts similar to the Isopanisad, the first verse over there is, here it is Isha Vasamidam Sarvam, there it was Atma Vasamidam Sarvam, Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha, Magridha Kasya Svedhanam. So here it was Isha Vasyam, there it was Atma Vasyam. And both of these are actually the same reality. They're referring to the same reality, just slight differences are there depending on time, place, circumstance. So there he is saying that what is the nature of the absolute truth? Chaksur yasya narishyati, that the eyes never blink. The eyes are always unblinking, always beholding the events of this world, eager to help the conditioned soul. So, Chakshuryasya Narishita. So the point is, at that level of the Paramatma realization, there is a supreme being who is the subject of consciousness, and the whole world is the object of consciousness, and then there is the stream of consciousness through which awareness takes place. However, at this stage of realization, there is no understanding of the spiritual direction for consciousness. And spiritually also there is a subject of consciousness and there is an object of consciousness. There is Krishna and there are the gopis. So Krishna is beholding the gopis and the gopis are beholding Krishna. Both of them are spiritual beings. So Krishna is beholding the gopis at that time. Krishna is the subject of consciousness, the gopis are the object of consciousness. And there is a stream of consciousness between them. But everything here is transcendental, it is all eternal. So the concept of spiritual reciprocations and pastimes at the spiritual level is not yet understood through the path of yoga. In yoga, one bases oneself on just passive contemplation on the absolute truth. Dhyanavastita tadgatena manasa pashyanti yam yogino. Dhyanavastita, when the yogis get situated in dhyana, tadgatena manasa, so with the mind, with the inner eye of the mind, pashyanti yam yogino, the yogis pursue that person. But they don't pursue that person completely. Who is that person? Yasyantaha na viduh sura suragana devaya tasmai namaha. Yasya antaha na viduhu, whose end is not known by anyone. Sura suraganaha. Neither the suras nor the asuras know the end of this person. So that is the absolute truth, who is pursued by the yogis during dhyana. That is not the complete perception at the Paramatma level. The complete perception is at the Bhagavan level. So what is the Bhagavan level? It is the absolute truth with material and spiritual potencies. So that is the Bhagavan realization. At the level of Bhagavan realization, one focuses on understanding the absolute truths as not only having material potencies, as capable of controlling material nature, but as also having a transcendental personality and having transcendental reciprocations with material and spiritual potencies. That is Bhagavan. So here one understands Sat, Chit and Ananda. And this aspect of the absolute truth is perceived only through bhakti. So how does Krishna have material and spiritual potencies? Ladini karai Krishna Ananda Swadana, Ladini dwara Krishna kare Bhaktera Poshana. So while describing the various energies of the absolute truth, Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that Ladini Shakti performs two functions. What are the functions? Ladini karai Krishna Ananda Aswadan. Ladini enables Krishna to experience joy, Ananda Aswadan. And then along with that, Ladini dwara Krishna kare, by Ladini, Krishna also does Bhaktera Poshana. Krishna nourishes his devotees. So Krishna is the supreme being and Ladini Shakti, who is manifested as Radharani, is his energy. So, of course, the Absolute Truth has many energies, but here we are talking the spiritual realm. She is his internal energy. So there is, this is Satchitananda is there over here. Of the Satchitananda features of the Absolute Truth are there. So like that, actually the Absolute Truth has many spiritual energies. And there is some with Sandhya Ladini, that's an entirely different subject for us. We can't explore it right now. But suffice it to say that the spiritual potencies enable the Lord to reciprocate love. Just like Yoga Maya, what does it do? It conceals Krishna's divinity so that various devotees can have appropriate rasa for their respective relationship with him. So Mother Yashoda cannot love Krishna as a child if She beholds Krishna as the Supreme Absolute Truth, as the God of all gods, as the master of Brahma and Shiva. So, in order for her to reciprocate love with Krishna, seeing him as her son, what is required is that she be able to forget the divinity of Krishna. And how does that happen? That happens by Yogamaya. What is Yogamaya? Now, this word Yogamaya is like a oxymoron. You remember what we discussed earlier? What is the oxymoron? There are two opposite senses, words with two opposite meanings which are combined together. Like if I say, that person is a courageous coward. How can somebody be a courageous coward? Either one is courageous or one is cowardly. So there are opposite senses which are brought together. So actually Yoga Maya is like that. Yoga is that which connects us with the absolute truth. Maya is that which disconnects us from the absolute truth. When we say a person is going into Maya, that means that person is forgetting reality and getting into illusion. Person is practicing yoga, that is to come to reality. So what is the whole idea of Yoga Maya? So Yoga Maya is a divine energy. That it is the Maya that deepens yoga. Normally Maya takes one away from yoga, but this is the Maya that increases yoga. How does this Maya increase yoga? Because this is the Maya which enables the devotee to feel greater and greater attraction for the Supreme Lord. So here the Lord, if he had no spiritual potencies, then he would always be the majestic Lord, and anything that people could do with him is, oh, you are our master, we bow down to you forever and ever and ever. Now, if the Lord were just exhibiting his cosmic majesty throughout all of eternity, the kingdom of God would not be a particularly exciting place. Of course, the Lord is so attractive that even bowing down to him for all of eternity would be attractive. But still, when the Lord covers his potency, covers his majesty, his supreme majesty, and then acts as if he were a small child or a charming youth, then the devotees can relish various rasas with him. So Yogamaya is an example of the Lord's energy which enables pastimes to happen at a spiritual level. So understanding all this, how the Supreme Being has spiritual energies, and through the spiritual energies, spiritual activities are performed. Now, if there were no spiritual energy, Yashoda Mai could not possibly chastise Krishna or tie up Krishna. Who can tie up the absolute truth? That's not possible. The absolute truth is infinite, the absolute truth is supreme. So the only person who can tie up the absolute truth is a person who forgets that the absolute truth is the absolute truth. And how will somebody forget the person absolute to the absolute truth? One is if that person is an illusion. The second is if the person is an illusion. But the two are different kinds of illusion. One is conditioned souls may be an illusion and they may think that this is not God. And there may be exalted devotees like Yashoda Mai who are a different kind of illusion. That it's a Maya that increases yoga. And by that she thinks, oh, this is my child. He's becoming mischievous. If he becomes mischievous, then he will get a bad name for himself. He will get a reputation of being a thief, of being a stealer of butter. And if he gets a bad reputation of being a stealer of butter, then nobody will give their daughter in marriage to him. And if he doesn't get married, then that will be disastrous. So therefore, for his good, I must discipline him. And to discipline him, I must tie him up. So this kind of thinking about the absolute truth it comes only because of a divine illusion. This is one example of how the absolute truth has spiritual energies. So this is the Bhagavan realization, and this comes by bhakti. So now we will discuss this a little bit more from another perspective, is how the Bhagavad Gita talks about this. We will be discussing this more when we study the Bhagavad Gita later on during our course, but right now let's focus on understanding in another way, based on the Gita, how Bhagavan is the highest realization. So now, If you remember in Sankhya, one goes beyond the material appearances to the material substances. So the material appearances are, there are good looking forms, good looking shapes, good looking tastes, nice smelling, whatever. Appealing tastes, shapes, and fragrances are there, smells are there. So one goes beyond them to the elements. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes that the elements are actually his energies. The 7.4 and 5 describe that Bhumirapo nalo vayu kammano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritir ashtadha. So Bhumirapo nalo vayu, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. These are my energies. So what does this verse demonstrate? In Sankhya, one has perceived beyond the material appearances to the material substances. So the material substances, they are not just independent realities. They are dependent realities because they are the energies of Krishna. So in Sankhya, one is not able to see them as energies of Krishna. One often sees them as independent realities. Just like scientists, they see the material world and they analyze the material world sometimes with phenomenal expertise. And they try to go beyond to see, okay, this particular color this is the element, and this is a combination of this element, this chemical is forming, and then this element is made up of this many atoms, or this atom has this many electrons and protons, and the level of intricacy in the analysis is phenomenal. But often this whole analysis is done in a non-theistic context. The connection with God is not seen. In the past, most scientists could see the connection with God. For example, Lord Kelvin says that actually, if one thinks deeply enough, one will be forced by science to believe in God. Max Born says that I studied the atom and in it I saw the glory of the Creator. There are big scientists who are able to see material nature and see there the connection of material nature with the Creator, with the Supreme Being. But just like many Sankhyites, they just see the material nature, but they don't go beyond it to see the connection with the Creator. Similarly, and here also in modern science, many scientists are unable to make the link between the glory, the magnificence of nature and the magnificence of the master of nature. But Krishna here, he takes the Sankhya typology, he takes the Sankhya framework of analysis, and then he shows how that is integrated into a theistic worldview. Yes, earth, water, fire, air, ether, these are the fundamental material elements, gross material elements. But where are they coming from? They are ultimately coming from the absolute truth. They are the energies of the absolute truth. So in Sankhya, if one actually analyzes the material elements and then one practices seeing them in connection with the absolute truth, then even the perception of material elements can lead to bhakti. So this is what is talked about in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam through the Virat Rupa. And similar third canto, Kapil Dev also shows how Sankhya ultimately leads to bhakti. And this same is talked about in the 18th chapter also in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, how Jnana also will lead to Bhagavan, Krishna describes this in the Bhagavad Gita in 7.19. When the person becomes truly Jnanavan, such a person surrenders to me. Bahunam janmanam ante Jnanavan mam prapadyate Vasudevah sarvamiti Samahatma sudurlabhaha. So Bahunam janmanam ante. After many lifetimes of philosophical searching, a person becomes Jnanavan, and when Jnanavan does, Mam prapadyate, such a person surrenders unto me. Why does such a person surrender? Prabhupada quotes in this purport also, Vasudeva sarvamiti. Such a person understands that Vasudeva is the absolute truth. There is no truth higher than Vasudeva. Sa Mahatma sudurlabhaha. Such a Mahatma is extremely rare. Now similarly, when we talk about the process of jnana, essentially one is perceiving the absolute truth as Brahman, but when one moves forward beyond that, one will come to Bhagavan. So this happens by the grace of the Absolute Truth. We see in the Bhagavatam several striking examples. Two of them, one is Shukadeva Goswami and the other is of the Kumaras. Both of them were attracted to the all-pervading, impersonal Brahman. But when they came to know about the Supreme Being, they became attracted to him. So that is the wonder of the Bhagavatam. Atma Ramascha Munayo Nirgrantha Pyurukrame Kurvantyahitu Kim Bhaktim Itham Bhuta Guno Harihe. So Atma Ramascha Munayo. There are great souls who are not attracted to anything. They are just self-satisfied. And they have no material attachments. Nirgrantha api urukrame. They are nirgrantha, they are completely detached. But urukrame, the Lord performs such wonderful pastimes. Kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim. That they perform ahaituki bhakti, unmotivated devotion to Him. Itham bhuta guno harihi. Such are the wonderful qualities of Lord Hari. So imagine that there is a person who is so, this is a different example from a material context. I'll explain how it relates with the spiritual context. But imagine there is a person who is fabulously wealthy, and whatever anybody may aspire for in this world, that person has got it. And such a person who, because of possessing everything, is satisfied, if suddenly we find that person is running after something, or running frantically to something, what will we understand? That means what that person is running for is something so special, so precious, that that person, whatever is right now there with that person, that is not valuable, not as valuable as what is being perceived and what is therefore being pursued. So we may not know what is that is being pursued, and we may not know how valuable that is, but the very fact that such a wealthy person is chasing after that indicates that that must be something very precious, something so precious that with all the wealth that the person has, that person cannot have it or doesn't have it. The person wants it. Similarly, in a different context, here the person, we would not expect the person to chase after anything because the person has so much. But here the example of Atma Ramascha Munayo is that the person is so utterly detached that the person needs nothing. Nirgrantha, there are no attachments. The more we have attachments, the more we need things. If I am attached to alcohol, then I cannot live without alcohol. If I am attached to tea, I cannot live without tea. But these people are nirgrantha, so they do not need anything. And they are atmaram, they are satisfied in themselves. Still, they perform bhakti to Lord Achyuta. Urukrama, to the Supreme Lord who performs wonderful pastimes, they perform bhakti. Why? Because that Supreme Lord must be possessing something which nobody else possesses, which nothing in the world can compare with. So in this way, one can by logical inference understand that the Supreme Lord's qualities are not something similar to that in the material world. Because those who are not attracted to anything in the material world are attracted to Him. That means whatever it is in Him that attracts them is not material, because nothing material is capable of attracting them. So in this way we can understand that the Jnanis, when they become attracted to Supreme Lord, His qualities are transcendental and their attraction is also transcendental to Him. So Shukadeva Goswami was like that. He was completely detached from everything material. And yet he became captivated when he heard through a disciple of Vyasadeva the glories of the Supreme Lord. He immediately wanted to hear more, and he came back to Vyasadeva and he heard, and then he became an exalted Mahabhagavat. Similarly, we have the story of Kumaras. The Kumaras, the four celibate sons of Brahmaji, they were attracted to the impersonal effulgence, but they had heard from the Supreme Lord they had heard from their father about the Supreme Vishnu who lived in Vaikuntha. Now they did not exactly understand what was Vishnu's position. Was he the Supreme Being, or was the Brahman higher, lower? They had no biased agendas when they went to the abode of Vaikuntha. They're just exploring. They're Brahmavadis. And when they beheld the form of Vishnu and fragrant tulsi from his lotus feet entered into their ear, Tasyaravinda nayanasya padaravinda. So Tasyaravinda nayanasya, that absolute truth has Aravinda nayana, beautiful lotus eyes. Padaravinda, from he who has lotus eyes, he has lotus feet also. Kinjal kamishra tulasi makaranda vayu. So Kinjal kamishra tulasi. So with the lotus feet, from the lotus feet, the tulsi that was there, the air that came from those lotus feet, which carried the fragrance of his lotus feet as well as the fragrance of tulsi, when it entered into their nose, then it agitated them. They who could not be agitated by anything material were agitated by the Lord's beauty. Sankshobham aksharajusham apichitta tanvo. Sankshobham aksharajusham. They were agitated, the Sankshobha, from their attraction to the impersonal, and they were elevated. So this is the Vasudeva Sarvamiti stage. So from the Jnana stage also one can come to Bhagavan through Bhakti. So what was the Bhakti? Their attraction to the Supreme Lord, based on what they had heard from Brahmaji. So through Shukadeva Goswami, it was his attraction to the Supreme Lord based on what he heard from Vyasadeva, who was a devotee. Now similarly, the process of yoga can lead to Bhakti. That means in the process of yoga, one focuses on beholding the super soul in the heart. But over a period of time, one understands that actually that super soul is not just a conscious being, is a conscious reciprocal being who performs pastimes. So in 6.29 in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says how the yogi perceives the super soul. Sarvabhutasthamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. The person sees everywhere equally because one sees the absolute truth. So this is referring to the Paramatma realization. But the next verse immediately, what does it say? Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachamena pranashyati. Says that one who sees me everywhere and sees everything, such a person is never lost to me, nor am I lost to him. So now these are in continuity, and the next verse is actually these two realizing the same. 6.31 says, Sarvabhutasthitham yo mam bhajati ekatvam sarvatha vartamanopi sayogi mai vartate. So it says that actually that being who is situated in the heart of all living beings and me, one who understands both of them are same, such a yogi is never lost. So essentially, this verse is describing a progression from Paramatma realization to Bhagavan realization. And this happens by the process of bhakti. So similarly, from karma also one comes to bhakti. In 3.30, Krishna describes that by the practice of bhakti yoga, one will come to, when one offers the fruits of karma to Krishna, then one slowly comes from karma towards bhakti. So here Krishna is talking about the process by which one rises up. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigata jvaraha. So Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya. So sarvani karmani sanyasya is karma yoga. But when Mai comes before that, not just give up the fruits of all the work, but give the fruits of all the work and offer those fruits to me. When Mai comes up, then there is a higher level over there. And that higher level is the rise towards bhakti. So essentially, the other processes, they will keep us stuck to a particular level of realization if one doesn't rise higher. But if one rises higher through the process of bhakti, then one will come to Bhagavan realization. In this way, Bhagavan is the ultimate realization. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport quotes from various sources. He quotes 14.26 from the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratisthaham. That Brahman is subordinate reality. Bhagavan is the highest reality. Brahman is supported by me, Krishna says. Similarly, in the Isopanisad, in the Brahma Samhita, there is Jasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti. That the Prabha is coming from that absolute being, and that absolute being is Govinda. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I offer my obeisances to that Govinda, I adore that Govinda, in whose effulgence there are innumerable universes floating. So like that, there are various references which substantiate the point made in this verse, that beyond the Brahman realization is the Bhagavan realization. So normally we consider that darkness blinds, but there are times when even brightness blinds. How is that possible? When people are traveling in a car, especially at night, then often accidents occur because there's a glare. The road is dark and suddenly a truck comes from the opposite side, and the truck suddenly increases the glare of its light. And in the darkness, when one suddenly is exposed to a bright light, that also leads to blindness. That also leads to a temporary blinding effect. So darkness blinds, but brightness can also blind at times. So in the material world, there is darkness because one cannot see any spiritual truth. Tamaso ma jyotirgam. That's the Upanishad saying that go from darkness to light. But when one moves from darkness to light, when suddenly from darkness one actually comes to light, the light is so bright, one gets blinded. Sometimes we experience that when power has gone off and we are just groping our way around, and if power has gone off for a long time, we're struggling to find our way and do things in the dark. Suddenly lights come, and suddenly all lights come at one moment. Because of the lights themselves, one can't see. So like that, when one moves from material reality towards spiritual reality, at that time material reality is filled with darkness, so one can't see. But when one comes to spiritual reality, there is a blinding effect because the Lord's effulgence is blinding. So brightness can also blind. Just as darkness can blind, brightness can also blind. So this mantra is basically a prayer to the Absolute Truth to take one beyond the blindness caused by brightness. So there's the blazing effulgence, hiranmayena patrena, the apavronu. Please remove that. So in this way, the verse asks us to go beyond not just the darkness that blinds, but also the brightness that blinds, to that Supreme Being who is the source of that brightness. That is the all-attractive Supreme Person, Sri Krishna. And He is the ultimate revelation of the Upanishads. He is the ultimate revelation of not just the whole body of Vedic literature, but He is the ultimate revelation of all the theistic traditions of the world. He is the ultimate aspiration of all hearts, of all living beings. And it is this Supreme Being who is so wonderfully revealed to us by the Vedic literature, as explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. He is the, as Srila Prabhupada said, the last word in transcendence. There is no reality higher than Him. And it is through that reality that the process of Krishna consciousness ultimately takes us. So to summarize, our discussion today basically focused on how Bhagavan realization is the highest realization. So in that we started with the verse of how one wants to be taken beyond the darkness, beyond the blindness that is caused by the blazing effulgence, towards the face of the Absolute. Mukham apavrunu. I want to see the face. And in that we discussed based on Srila Prabhupada's purports, how in Sankhya one goes beyond material appearances to material substances. One sees the Absolute Truth as the material elements. In Jnana, one perceives the Absolute Truth as not material substances, but as a spiritual substance. However, a spiritual substance without any potencies, material or spiritual, just consciousness. Then, in yoga, is one level higher. One sees the Absolute Truth as a spiritual substance with consciousness and energies to control the material nature. In bhakti, one sees the Absolute Truth as spiritual substance with material and spiritual potencies. And this is the realization that comes by bhakti. The other processes give us intermediate realization. Sankhya takes us up to Absolute Truth material elements. Jnana takes us to Absolute Truth without any potencies. So Absolute Truth as spiritual substance without any potencies. Yoga takes us to Absolute Truth as spiritual substance with only material potencies. But it's bhakti which takes us to the realization of Absolute Truth with material and spiritual potencies. And the other processes also If one does them under the rubric of bhakti, when integrates them with bhakti, then gradually bhakti will predominate and one can get the highest realization even if one has started with the other processes. In this way, one comes to the realization that Bhagavan is the ultimate revelation, the highest manifestation of the absolute truth. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.